Hello, welcome everybody. Thank you for being here today. We are broadcasting live from Salt Lake City, where Brian is, and Park City, where I still can't seem to leave for some reason. So welcome everybody. I'm so glad that you're joining us today. We have a lot of people that are going to be coming on. Just a little bit of housekeeping for Zoom, as you're all accustomed to so far, but we can't hear or see you, but we can definitely welcome your questions in the chat box in the Q&A, and we encourage you to ask them as they come to mind, and we'll get to as many as possible, and they are most welcome. Also, for the record, we're going to be recording this and posting it on the Family Office Insights YouTube channel. So as you view the presentation that we're having today, and you either want to review it yourself or share the YouTube channel link with anybody that you think would benefit from hearing about what Brian is going to share with us today, you're welcome to do so. And also, we're going to make sure that Brian has your contact information, and you'll be able to contact him directly, and he'll reach out to you post-webinar. So I guess the best way to, even though I'm a neophyte in this space, I've been able to learn a lot from Brian, actually, and some of his friends that I met here in Salt Lake City, including people who are doing NFTs and Metaverse and all the buzzwords that are happening today. But Brian has really interesting background, which I'm going to ask him to share with you as we get started here, that is enabled him to develop something here that's super interesting, and I think you'll all find, if not interesting by itself, but potentially as an investor. So that's the point here. We're sharing this with you today because there's a raise going on, and so just to be clear, there's an ask involved. So as usual, I have no skin in the game, meaning in this case, I don't own any part of the company, and of course, as usual, we do not participate in any success fees. So if you invest, we're not getting paid to do so. So again, just full disclosure. So I've got to know Brian in a short period of time because he's here in Salt Lake and I'm in Park City, and we've had many a nights into the wee hours, me trying to learn a little bit more about what's going on in this world. So I thank you for that, Brian, and welcome, and please take it away.
Awesome, and thank you for having me, Arthur. I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to speak here and share what we're up to. So a little bit about myself before I get into the technology that we built. So again, my name is Brian Christensen. I'm the founder of Blockcities, and we are a property technology company that's developing a platform that allows users basically to design the future that they wish to experience. And so a little bit of background on myself. So I started off in the world of real estate just right before the 2008 crash. Kind of foresaw that coming, and more or less increased some buying power and getting ready for the crash. And as soon as that hit, started acquiring properties, mostly around the Midwest, a little bit in the Northeast and Southeast as well, but single family, multifamily properties that we would fix up, get tenants in place, property management there, season it for a little bit, and then turn around and sell it as a performing asset. And so we were managing everything here from Utah. And we're basically able to expand into about 12 or so markets throughout the US. Eventually transitioned out of that and into more sustainable development as I saw the need for more sustainable practices to be implemented in real estate. And so that's kind of more or less the world I come from. Started getting into more product development and software more recently, but really what kind of kicked this project off was I acquired some property down in Belize. It was 500 acres with an option to purchase an additional 6,500 acres. The intention was basically to build an eco-village and do it in a way that was open source, meaning that users could decide ultimately the types of housing that would get built, the types of experiences that they have, the food they eat, how they get around, etc. So a user-generated destination, which really has not been done. Along that same time frame, what happened is Ethereum came out. And Ethereum, for those that you don't know, has certain functions that are very useful. The smart contracts are part of that. And basically what this meant, and even if the technology wasn't there yet, I kind of foresaw where it was going in terms of what it could be applied towards. And so smart contracts, meaning that you can program the disbursement of money and how it flows and who it flows to. So immediately we started building out the technology to be able to facilitate open source destinations coming about. And we've really spent the last 4 years building out the technology and are really excited to release it. So we are just in the final stages right now. Everything is on test nets currently and in testing phase, and we expect to be in beta within the next 90 days. So excited to kind of jump in and share what we put together.
So define for the group the open source I'm going to get the words wrong. So what's that really mean, open source?
Yeah, so I mean, open source is basically just a collaborative function, where people can add and contribute to a project. And so for the most part, open source applies right now currently to the world of software, just because that's where most open source projects are taking place in, but very much has a place in the physical world as well, even though we have not yet seen it. But ultimately, if you have, let's say, a community that's coming together and you have owners within that, people can basically buy in to the ownership model and influence essentially what happens there at that location. And so that's basically what kind of kick things off. That answers your question there out there. But,
Yep. Thank you.
Perfect. So yeah, we've been able to basically build out a really strong advisory board. One of our advisors, more recently, Brock Pierce, invited me down to El Salvador just as soon as they had announced the whole transition to Bitcoin as fiat. So I got the opportunity to present to the government there alongside a couple other companies, but very much see a massive opportunity coming up when it comes to the onboarding of other jurisdictions. It's been really interesting to watch, especially with the amount of money creation that's happened over the last year and a half. Pretty much every country that's based in the dollar is very much looking to pivot. They essentially receive no benefit from that, but the buying power is going down. And so there's just a lot of interest right now in the world of obviously Bitcoin. More recently, NFTs have obviously blown up quite a bit. And so, timing is everything. And I feel like we've definitely timed it well. So as far as myself goes, like I said, Brian Christensen, I've been building this out for the last 4 years. And really the main driver for myself is being able to leave the planet just a little bit better than we found it. I've got 2 daughters, ages 12 and 13, that I very much feel like they're inheriting a world as it sits right now that is just not up to par, we'll put it that way. And so, very much building out tools that can empower people to be able to create a new future in the world of sustainability and otherwise. That's definitely been the driving force. So let's get into it.
So we have one person that says they can't see the screen, but I can see it, so arguably. Okay, now they can see it. You're good.
Okay, perfect. All right, so Blockcities is ultimately a bridge between the digital and physical worlds. For anyone that's been paying attention, the Metaverse is very much an up and coming area that's going to receive a lot of attention. And unfortunately, a lot of the depictions as far as the Metaverse goes, Ready Player One being one of them, and obviously Facebook and their plans, a lot of it gets a bad rap for being a little bit dystopian in nature. But in terms of what the Metaverse is going to enable, we can't even imagine what that's going to unlock for the world. All right, so in terms of, I guess, driving factors, like I was saying, ultimately it comes down to the contrast between how things are right now and how it could be. And so right now we live in a planet that's very much not on a sustainable trajectory. Let me just pull that back here. I'll pause it for just a second. So the current trajectory that the planet's on is obviously not sustainable, and this applies just across the board, environmentally, economically, et cetera. But meanwhile, we have the tools that have been developed that allow us to create something different. And so by leveraging these tools, such as decentralized finance, decentralized autonomous organizations, also known as DAOs, non-fungible tokens, NFTs, as well as collective intelligence, and then programmable smart contracts, we can leverage these things to be able to identify solutions and then bring those solutions forward. And so the platform that I built is one that allows for ideas to take physical form through a process of voting, pre-reservation, and then investment into physical assets.
So Brian, I don't want to put any pressure on you, but
No, go ahead.
The term metaverse has been, floated about quite a bit. I'd love it if you could just give your definition of that.
Yeah, so the metaverse, I mean, it means different things to different people, but ultimately it's the digital layer, the infrastructure that allows for people to not just spin up, their own worlds essentially and create, but also allows for commerce to take place in a different form than has happened previously. I don't know if anyone's heard of Fortnite, but this is kind of one example where there's been some of the largest concerts that have ever taken place have been done on the metaverse. And so that's just the first kind of like segue into it. But in terms of just general commerce, what this allows for people to do is interact with businesses and these virtual worlds in such a way where, whether it's through virtual reality or just on the web, basically where you can tie the digital world into the physical as well. So I don't know if that's a great definition, but ultimately the metaverse is something that is being developed just across the board in a lot of different ways. So it'll be very interesting to watch kind of the evolution of that, but we're just at the beginning stages right now.
Yeah, that's super helpful.
Yeah. So basically the platform here, what we've done is created, like I said, a bridge that ties in the digital and physical worlds together. So I'll kind of show you what that looks like. So the first step here is we've created a geographically linked virtual Earth. And what this means is that these little hexagon tiles get placed over the Earth in such a way where each tile obviously is covering a certain area, and people can unlock functionality in the real world by purchasing a tile. Okay, this is step one. And the reason that we've done it this way is it basically allows us to provide a revenue sharing mechanism that allows for the fees that we charge through our platform for someone else to capture a percentage of those fees. So very similar to if you were to basically be launching a franchise, this basically allows you to participate in some of the revenue being generated for all the functionalities on our platform within a new area. That also provides a natural incentive. If you are, let's say, the tile owner and you've just now unlocked real world functionalities for your city, there's a natural incentive there to onboard your friends and community onto the platform so that you can actually transact and do things. One other thing I'll mention about the map, well, there's probably a couple of things. I'm a fan as far as like the infrastructure here. We've basically built this out in such a way that, number one, is compatible with gaming engines such as Unity. So it has 2D and 3D capability, and it's just super, super versatile in terms of additional functionalities down the road that we can integrate, all the way down to migration patterns using satellite imagery to agricultural analysis. There's a lot of different things that we've built into this mapping layer. Right now, the way that we've set it up is we are pulling in data from a wide variety of sources, everything from your census data, your rental data, property values, Airbnb, etc. And it basically allows you to pull up just a quick snapshot of an area and then be able to see exactly what the average rental rates are so that you can determine whether or not it makes sense to go the route of short-term versus long-term rentals. And so along with this, while we're pulling in the data and storing this, we're also starting to apply some machine learning on it so that in the future we can actually have the ability to predict future valuations in terms of, is an area going up in value or down in value in terms of like the local real estate market.
So you're probably going to get to it, so forgive me if you are. Can you give an example if someone bought a hexagon, a couple examples of how they might monetize it?
Yep. Yeah, in fact, I'll be getting right into it right now.
Okay, no rush.
Yeah. All right, so to answer that question, the primary functions that ultimately are at the very core of our platform are voting, pre-reservation, and then investment into physical assets. So on the voting side, let's talk about that for a minute, because this part, there's actually multiple scenarios of voting that you can spin up. This can be universally applied whether you are municipality, whether you're an HOA, a board of directors, or a real estate developer. You can basically spin up different forms of voting scenarios and actually customize those depending on whether or not you want it to be public facing or not, whether you want the individual votes to be anonymous or not, and just the end result blockchain verified. So voting is really one of the huge value adds that the blockchain presents in terms of being able to get a verifiable outcome, which is obviously something that a lot of our government, voting scenarios have not had, a lot of confidence with. And so when it comes to voting, the initial functionality that we built this out intending was very much from like a development perspective. As a user, would you rather have this type of unit or this type of unit? And then what are you willing to pay per night or per month for that unit? So it allows us to basically gauge where the demand is, and which is the perfect indication of interest, for investors to be able to justify a decision. And then there's, like I was saying, there are multiple forms of voting. So I'll hit those really quick. There's a general vote, which is where you can just spin up any scenario for voting and determine whether or not it's public or private and anonymous or not. But that's just kind of a universal voting tool. The second relates to actual asset owners. And so if someone goes through and purchases a little slice of an asset, then on the back end, then they have the ability to vote in a way that's weighted proportionally to how much they own within that investment. So let's say if down the road, if a property management company had to be replaced because they're not performing, this allows the owners to basically spin up a scenario and propose that they kick out the management company and get a new one in the place. And basically everyone can place a vote with their votes equaling the weight of their investment. Okay, and then the third is quadratic voting, which if we have time towards the end, I'll get into that, but that's super exciting and very useful function that has not yet been done really ever. Pre-reservation, so let's talk about this. This allows for a user to lock in a discounted rate of something that does not yet exist. Okay, and the function here is very similar to Kickstarter in that it allows people to support things that they actually want to see happen in a way where their funds are protected and they can lock in a future use of that thing. For the user, they get a discounted rate, of course, but then the funds are then held in escrow until a target is met. And then once the target is met, funds go hard and apply towards the project itself. And so, through this process of the voting, pre-reservation, and investment, this allows us to basically take the best designs that exist, allow users to vote on them, pre-reserve future use, and then for investors, that gives the perfect indication of interest, because potentially an asset could be sold out the first year of its life. And so if someone can raise 10, 20% of the total cost of a project just simply through pre-reservations, that's a great indicator that it's going to be successful. On the investment side,
Okay, can you give an example of what a project would be?
really, this would be any type of real estate development. So like a new construction project where, let's say if it's, I don't know, a sustainable village, or it could be a single house, really. But any type of new construction project where the developer is still at a phase where they have not yet decided on the exact unit designs. So they could basically throw out different scenarios for different setups and basically allow users to indicate which one they're more likely to use. That makes sense?
Yep, got it.
Perfect. And then on the investment side, so this is where you can purchase a slice of an investment in the form of a tokenized security. And what this means is that rather than having to spend funds where you're purchasing 100% of an asset, this allows you to buy a little 1% slice of 100 different assets rather than 100% of one asset. So this enables users, number one, it lowers the barrier of entry to be able to participate in investments. But number two, it allows for the diversification, not just across asset classes, but also geographies. To me, it doesn't make sense to have all your eggs in one basket. So being able to, put in a very small amount into different projects, very similar to a stash app, that's ultimately the function.
So in this case, would Blockcities be the one that had decided which assets were going to be available that you could buy incremental shares of, and have done whatever due diligence that would have been done to put those on the program? Or would the users be putting up properties?
Yeah, no, good question. So users will be the ones that are submitting assets into the system, and there is a basically review and due diligence process we go through just to make sure that everything is on the up and up, and also structured in a way that's legally compliant. Once everything looks good, then it's approved and put onto the platform. And so we will have our own internal assets that we will be offering as well, but I suspect the bulk of assets that will be represented on the platform are going to just be through users and operators. All right, so one of the things that I absolutely love about how this has been designed is that everything is modular in nature. And what that means is that there's no limitation to the number of asset types that can be created, as well as the number of professions that can be started through the platform. And so it's a very simple process if you wanted to create a new type of asset. And that could be anything from, let's say, an asset type would be an SPV, or maybe it's a renewable energy asset, or maybe it's a modular dwelling. These are all different types of assets, and within each type, you can specify the requirements. So as far as whether or not a private placement is required, whether or not there's a whole time requirement, etc. As far as the professions go, this is incredibly helpful because this allows us to tie in existing licensed professionals into the mix where we are able to offer baked-in compliance and still utilize the existing framework that people are accustomed to. So part of the thing that blockchain is known for in some ways is getting rid of the intermediaries. And I would propose that you don't want to do that all the time. Very much you want to make sure that you are following traditional methods. And if things can be scaled in such a way where efficiencies make it so that you don't need to have certain professions, great. But ultimately, you're still going to need a general contractor to build. You're still going to need an escrow agent to handle the disbursement of funds within a construction project. There's still a number of things that tie into real world professions that we don't want to overlook. And so the way that this has been set up is where professionals are able to actually participate within a project, and it's done in a way that's really, really easy for them. They simply just upload proof that they did their task, they mark complete, and then it triggers the next step in the process. And so what this means is that we're able to actually program the disbursement of money in a way where everything is recorded using immutable ledger technology. And basically we can work with existing professions and legal frameworks, so we are offering things in a compliant way. And all of this is done and facilitated through the smart contracts. And so basically everything is baked in, which allows us to actually program the disbursement process and how that works.
So is it fair to say that once a project is on this platform, that it more or less creates a smart contract automatically in the background?
Correct, yes. Once a project is approved, then basically everything is programmed according to an escrow agreement. So at the very front of it, it basically spells out, okay, here are the number of milestones. And really, this can look different for any type of project. So maybe in the case of, let's just say if it's a modular asset, so meaning something that is a factory built house, let's just say, that's going to get shipped and then set up on site. Okay, that's a scenario where you would never want to send 100% of the funds to the manufacturer of that asset and then just cross your fingers. You would probably want to do, whether it's a 30% retainer or maybe it's a 50% upfront, 50% upon installation. So under that scenario, it'd probably look like 2 milestones or 3 milestones that would be created. But it basically allows for both parties to be able to get what they're expecting in a way that has checks along the way. And so in this instance, this is kind of showing a construction project as an example, where it's splitting up into 4 different milestones. And then within each milestone, there's multiple professionals that are performing a role. Okay, a role is just whatever task that they're assigned with to complete with the project. And like I said, all they do is just simply upload proof, which might look like on the general contractor's end, before and after photos, receipts, and maybe an inspection report that shows that everything got done the way that they're supposed to. But this basically allows us to include the professionals in a way where all the documents are stored using blockchain technology, and then all this whole process is automated using the smart contracts. All right, and then as far as the different asset types, like I said, there is no limit to the number of assets that could be facilitated through this platform. So really, it could be anything from modular housing to your traditional real estate, traditional multifamily or development, et cetera. Managed agriculture is actually one of the areas that we're super excited about, especially with a lot of the issues that we're facing right now when it comes to supply chains. Very much everyone needs to eat. And so part of the reason that agriculture, I feel like, has not been scaled nearly to the degree that it needs to is because no one's necessarily looking to become a farmer, so to speak, and there hasn't been a product that's been introduced that allow for people to support agriculture. But meanwhile, when it comes to the actual farms, they are able to generate a pretty strong return while being secured by a physical asset. And so based off of the historical financials of our partner, our main agriculture partner, which is Simply Natural Farms, they have 225,000 acres of managed plantations split up between 7 different countries and handle everything from seed to sale within a farm life cycle. And so, they're already plugged in with all of the grocery chains, ranging from like your Aldi to Trader Joe's, Whole Foods, et cetera. And so for the investor, this is able to produce roughly a 17% internal rate of return. It's secured by the physical asset itself, the underlying land that operations are taking place on. but it allows for someone to support additional agriculture operations in a way where it's still profitable and it's secured by physical asset, but they're able to jump into a project, with only a couple $1,000s instead of, needing massive capital to do so. And so the same thing when it comes to renewable energy. These are, what we're talking about here are resource producing assets. And so in the same way that an income producing asset, let's say with, rental properties would apply, the same thing is applicable here, is you have basically a management company that's handling everything and an underlying asset that's able to produce a resource that has a very quantifiable value. And so, renewable energy is great because, essentially can never become a non-performing asset. If someone stops making the payment, then essentially you can divert the energy over somewhere else. But, renewable energy is also another area that can also be, quite profitable, and there's a massive demand for it, in particular in the US right now, just because Bitcoin mining is obviously, been kind of pushed out of China. And so there's a lot of, mining technologies that are looking for a new home that are, renewable focused. SPVs, like I said, are going to be another asset type on the platform. And so this can relate to a real estate project or a fund or, whatever the SPV is applicable to, but just another asset type that can be facilitated.
So can we talk about an example, for example, the agriculture?
Yeah.
They wouldn't need to exclusively be on your platform for someone to participate in the investment. They could just have an incremental part on the platform.
So in order to purchase the fractional ownership, they would have to go through our platform to do so. Yes. That said, we do have things built out in a way where other people can host their projects within their own websites. And so like if you are essentially the one that is doing a new construction project and you want to be able to post it on your website, our platform basically spits out a little a widget, a little piece of code that you can just copy and paste and stick on your site. But that does take them back to Blockcities, where they'll register and go through the KYC process.
But the agriculture company that you mentioned doesn't need to have their entire enterprise on Blockcities.
Oh, no, not at all.
Right.
Yeah. Correct. Yeah. So no exclusivity required there.
Yeah. And could an investor drive the interest? In other words, could an investor say, I want to participate as an investor on this thing, and that thing had nothing to do with Blockcities? Could the investor drive the Blockcities to reach out to that particular opportunity and cause it to easily be on the platform?
Yes, absolutely. You can, so within the platform, you can basically propose a project, or you can refer an existing project or asset owner. And so actually one of the things that's interesting about how we've designed this is because we recognize at any given point, there's going to be different things that we are going to have greater need for. So let's just say we're at one given point, we're looking for landowners that have several thousand acres that they're open to either selling or doing a joint venture on. We can incentivize the onboarding of landowners, or if we're looking for general contractors, same thing there. So we can basically incentivize for certain projects or certain types of people to come onto the platform. And as a user, you can most definitely refer someone to it or project to it. Absolutely.
So we have a question. Is there a mechanism, is there a mechanism by which investors on the platform can invest automatically across the whole portfolio of Blockcity projects, or some subset, for example, all renewables, or is it case by case?
Great question.
Thank you, Tom.
Yep. Yeah, no, Tom, that's on point for sure. Part of what we're doing next is going to be, we're filing for a decentralized autonomous organization. And what that'll allow us to do is to create buckets. And these buckets are essentially going to be verticals that you can put money into where it's at that exact concept. So, that said, that's not a functionality that is currently up on our platform, but I suspect within the next 4 months, that functionality will be live. So absolutely the direction that we're going, which is going to be interesting because, that allows us to offer both securities, tokenized securities, as well as tokenized utilities through the platform. And the reason I bring this up is because, this is very much something that can be used in a very useful way in terms of being able to put your money into a particular bucket to grow a functionality for a thing. I'll give you one example is, let's say if you live in California and your street has been taken over by homeless people, which is a very real thing, and you want to be able to provide some type of solution so that you can get to your house without having to, go through a tent city. Hypothetically, there could be a bucket created that is attacking homelessness within an area where you could put your money into something, and that is very much not considered a security. You are doing that for the intention of growing the usefulness of a particular function. And so being able to do things in a way where there are multiple buckets that are offered, which could mean an actual investment, or it could mean that you're just simply growing a utility. These are all functionalities that we've designed our platform to facilitate, for sure. Great question.
Thanks. I know you've got a bunch to talk to us about, but can we sneak in the ask now?
Oh, yeah, sure. As far as what we're looking for?
Yeah.
So this is something, I've been building out this platform for 4 years now off of blood, sweat, and tears, and have gotten things to a point where very much the technology is developed, the partnerships are there, and we're ready to go to market. I cannot emphasize the usefulness of the platform, but I obviously am a little bit biased. That said, we are very much in a seed round right now, so that we can make sure that we've got proper capitalization in preparation for our launch. And so making sure that we are staffed up to be able to handle operations, is kind of the main focus right now, as well as go to market and marketing as well. And so as we prepare for launch, we are doing a 2.25 seed round that we'd love to have your participation in. Minimum investment is $25,000, and everything is done through a convertible note. Basically, that converts into shares at a 20% discount upon qualified financing event. And so in terms of the valuation, basically the convertible note just sets the minimum and maximum valuation amounts, the minimum being 8, the maximum being 24. But allows for someone to basically participate at the ground floor of technology that's going to be an inevitable blockbuster.
So it's equity in the company as opposed to the tokens?
So good question. So as part of our token launch, very much there is an allocation that the Blockcities team essentially is receiving in terms of out of the total amount of tokens that will be in circulation. Blockcities receives X amount. And so out of that, anyone that is an equity investor within Blockcities will receive a proportionate amount of tokens. And so to answer your question, it is both equity within Blockcities Inc., as well as additional tokens that are proportionate to their investment.
Great, but it's not separate. The tokens, the security tokens, and a security token, right? Not a utility token.
So they'll be receiving utility tokens, basically just as a bonus, which then later on they'll be able to actually use to invest into projects as well. Okay,
so the equity is like any other equity, and it comes along with utility token commensurate with the amount of the investment.
Yep, correct.
Yeah, great. Super.
I don't know how it's going to be for streaming a video, but I've got a video here pulled up, so let's give it a
try. Yeah.
In the year 1965, two computers communicated with each other for the first time. Fast forward 50 years, and over half the planet has come online. And despite widespread adoption, we've yet to use the internet as a tool that serves the collective good of the planet. Our planet's current trajectory is not sustainable, and there's not a lot of options available for people to change that. Until now, Blockcities is proud to introduce a platform for powering a sustainable future for the fractionalization of physical assets. Here's how it works. Users choose the future they wish to experience using blockchain-powered voting, pre-reservation, and asset fractionalization. Real estate, agriculture, and renewable energy infrastructure gets split into shares and tokenized using blockchain technology. Token holders participate in revenue generated without the barrier to entry of traditional real estate. Visit blockcities.com to learn more and sign up for early access.
All right, so that was an action item. What should people do now to, I mean, we're going to put you in touch with everybody and vice versa, but if they wanted to come on to blockcities.com and register, was probably a good idea, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So there's a form there that allows you to register as either a general user or as an investor. And it's basically like a placeholder for as soon as that we're live with all functionalities being public facing, where you're basically getting early access to the platform.
So aside from the raise, is all the regulatory issues associated with this sort of thing in place?
Yeah, so that's part of why we have domiciled ourselves out of Wyoming. They were really the very first to come up with a clear legal framework in terms of utility and security token and just the definitions of those, as well as the very first to create the legal framework for DAOs, which is a completely new type of entity. This is something that I can't emphasize how big of a deal this is, because I would say that DAOs ultimately will play a massive role in our future. DAOs meaning a company that is not owned by one person, but a decentralized group that could be spread out all over the world. And so Wyoming created the legal framework for that, and that was passed just recently, about 2 months ago.
And you're in the process of getting your DAO approved?
Yep, correct.
And how long does that usually take?
I mean, we would expect to have approval within the next 2-3 weeks.
And so how long have you been in the process?
What's that?
I'm sorry, I interrupted you. So how long has it taken?
Taken as far as like to get it to the point.
Like when did you start the approval process?
Well, so in order to actually get approved, you have to be able to show your code essentially. And so there's, it's been many years building up to it in order to get to a point where we can file. But yeah, I mean, the process itself, as far as actually getting approved, is, very, very similar to just forming an LLC or other type of entity out of that state, which, is beautiful.
Very cool. And then one of the things we haven't talked about was the Blockcities revenue model as it relates to putting a project on.
Yep, great question. So the revenue model is, primarily transaction. So every function that's facilitated through our platform, from voting, reservation, investment, all of them come with, there's always going to be a fee to transact. The base fee for all functionalities is going to be 2.5%, up to 5%, depending on what the actual functionality is, but basically transactional. And so along with that, like I was saying, that's kind of the mechanism that allows for anyone that's purchasing a little hexagon when it comes to like the mapping layer, they're able to receive a percentage of that fee. And so meanwhile, that unlocks obviously new areas for us to get into. But to answer your question, transactional in nature.
Does that fee cover the Ethereum gas, for example?
So that's in addition to the gas, which I'm glad you asked, because that's definitely been one of the challenges in terms of facilitating things in a way where it's not not very consumptive, and B, not passing on a ton of fees to the user. And so part of the technology that we built out is one that is both private or utilizing both private and public blockchains, for that reason, because we can basically operate using a private blockchain in a way where there's virtually minimal, if any, gas. And so for voting, that would be an example of how we're facilitating voting is using a private blockchain.
So I don't mean to complicate things, but was it Solana
Yep.
has become massive?
Yep.
Is that a potential replacement for Ethereum in this case?
Not a replacement for Ethereum yet. However, that's exactly the system that we're utilizing for the NFTs. So when it comes to creating the little hexagon tiles that are NFTs, we're using Solana for that.
Yeah, super cool. It made it sound like I knew what I was talking about, but
no, very, very much. Solana is like, the leader in the space right now when it comes to being able to facilitate a massive amount of transactions in a way that's not energy consumptive. They're definitely leading the way for sure.
So this has been super helpful. Is there one other thing you want to get to before we wrap up?
It's a good question. Well, so I guess, what I'll do just very, very quickly, just kind of showing this in the background is,
oh, cool.
This is our mobile app. So like I said, we've developed a number of technologies that all just play with each other. This is our mobile app, which is a little bit more of a gamified process that users can use to be able to vote, pre-reserve, invest, etc., which will basically sync up with our web app, which I'll show you here in just a minute. But everything is basically built out. And right now we're just in testing mode, getting ready to go live. One of the functionalities that is super unique, because I've not seen this anywhere else. So this is on the investment side. Right here, you're just looking at the forma for a proposed project. Basically, you can pull up the offering documents, et cetera, from there. But this part right here is super useful. This is like a Domino's pizza tracker, but for assets.
Yeah, it's the progress of the smart contract, right?
Yep, exactly. So what this allows us to do is to be able to show investors exactly where things are at based off of where the smart contract is at in the process of distribution, which is beautiful. Because as an investor, I would very much want to be able to pull something up and be able to tell in real time, exactly what's going on without having to send out an email or, get a hold of the platform. And so
we've become so accustomed to making sure we know where our Amazon package is, and we have anxiety if we don't know, right? How cool is that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Anyway, so and then I won't get into the platform, that much, but I do want to be able to just show, that we have actually built things out, because this has been, a long time coming. And so over here, I'm pulling up the admin side. So you can see here on the right, this is kind of like the process behind the milestones, where you have an escrow agreement and then each milestone, you'll be able to pull that up, see who's involved. We've got rentals that basically are synced up and work with both Airbnb and Expedia. So that means that as a user or as an investor, you can basically use these other platforms to be able to rent out assets, but they also sync up with Blockcities, where if you want to be able to just rent something eternally, it allows you to do so. So that's our admin side. This is kind of our main user portal, where you can basically browse different assets, submit your own, purchase the token, invest, etc. And then it also allows you to basically create a little referral widget, or also do the same thing for underneath different assets, where you can basically get a little widget, it spits out a code, copy and paste this, and now you can actually showcase your project on your own website. And so these are all things that are, basically already built out and functional. You register as a professional or as an accredited investor, etc. But just tons of useful functions that are facilitated through here.
Very cool. So, folks, I had Brian and I were together a couple weeks ago, I guess maybe 3 weeks ago, and I had laid out a scenario where it required to create a new advisor or a professional, and he created it in less than 10 minutes, like it was maybe 5 minutes. So the functionality was able to accommodate a fact pattern that I was making up. And he opened up his computer, and in less than a few minutes, it was done. So it was super.
Which was super fun to be able to do, because that was right after we had made a number of new functionalities live. And so just kind of elaborate a little bit, because within that, we were talking about a couple different things. We're talking a hypothetical scenario of creating an SPV that invests in based off of certain rules, right? And so within that, creating a new asset type of an SPV, because everything had just gone live onto the system. So I had to basically spin up a new asset type. I had to create a new role of, let's say, an advisor, and then basically add that and add a couple professions. So within 10 minutes, I was able to add a new asset type, add a whole new profession onto the platform, and upload my asset within 10 minutes, which was really exciting to be able to do.
Really exciting, super cool. So is there something you wanted to cover here?
So I mean, I was just kind of showing the overall mapping functionality. For those of you guys that are tech people, we're built on Mapbox, which is like an open source mapping functionality that also plays well with, like I said, Unity gaming engines. But this allows us to very much scale out the metaverse side of things. And so we've partnered with a company more recently that will be actually building out our digital layer, which is then tied to our map. But it basically just extends out what we've built into the metaverse in a way where the metaverse is now going to have real world capabilities in terms of people being able to come together, decide to build or to do a certain thing, and then the actual process behind bringing that to fruition. So
how are the prices and the value of a hexagon established?
Yeah, good question. So initially, we're starting it off where the areas that have a strong presence for cryptocurrency users currently are naturally going to be a little bit higher in price than other ones, where maybe cryptocurrency is, very infrequently used. And so, in general, they're going to be right around 2 Ether or so is what we are planning on. Not all hexagons are going to be available initially. We want to be able to start off offering this in locations that we know that we can facilitate. So this allows us to very much ease into that in such a way where we can scale into other jurisdictions, but we can do so in a very controlled manner.
Super cool.
Yeah.
Very well. I have endless questions, but we got to scoot. So I'll make sure everybody's in touch with you. Hopefully, if you're around, let's get together in Park City, if you don't mind, if you're available before you run off to New York. Yeah. And if anybody's going to be in New York, Brian will be there, I guess, the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, I guess, in November, something like that. And so, but we'll put you in touch directly. And I super appreciate Brian. It's wildly interesting to me. And I know the folks that will enjoy speaking with you. We'll put everybody in touch. So thank you again. And thank you all for being here today and offering us the only thing you can't make more of, and that's your time. So until next time, thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Okay.